It's our pleasure to introduce for tonight's live share what I think will be a no pressure, a fascinating speaker. Without question, the 21st century is defined so far has been defined by two extreme positions within the religious world, or let's say the theological world. One is the rejection of the theological world. Atheism's without question on the rise. On the other end, there's been an extreme rise in fundamentalism among religions, both religions general as well as within Judaism as well. I think today's, Nima would agree, I think today's protests in Yerushalayim would reflect the notion of the increase in fundamentalism that's taking place. Not to wade into politics. But anyway, with that said, for those familiar with Gerus, conversion in Judaism, for someone to become a convert today is should be a very, very striking, questionable concept, because the world today sees itself as very modern, advanced, and religion is looked down upon in many circles. For someone to be turned on, so to speak, and interested in Judaism to the point where they'll give up their regular life and become a Jew, in and of itself is something that mixes between admirable, but you have to scratch your head and wonder why. What was the motivation for such a thing? On top of that, before I introduce Manson Ho, his history is incredible because he was raised in an evangelical Christian house. So even more so, to go from an environment where you are indoctrinated with a certain religious outlook and to reject that outlook and accept this religious outlook, in and of itself is a much larger step. So I think that alone is something that is fascinating, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about. Along with the other hotbed issue today is, if you guys follow hotbed Jewish political issues, is the issue of conversion itself. There's a big debate. I don't know if debate's a kind word, but there's a big debate between Israel and America, or diaspora Jewry, about how rigorous the conversion process has to be. Just recently, there was one rabbi who was isolated and picked out as not being considered reliable insofar as his admission that a certain person was a Jew and this person was going through a certain process. And these kind of issues are very troubling because, and again, Am Yisrael should be one, but when you start applying different religious standards within Orthodox Judaism, it can be very, very troubling. So I've heard different anecdotes about the conversion process in Eretz Yisrael. Now I'm looking forward to actually hearing what really takes place in Eretz Yisrael in the conversion process. So I've also just wanted one personal note. I've been giving shiur in the shul I daven at Shabbos afternoons in Mincha Mar for about over a year now, something like that. And I remember when Manson Ho joined the shiur, so every question he asks, every question is always on the mark. So I think that's for two reasons. One, because he's a very intelligent person and sharp. And two, because he comes from an unbiased background when it comes to how to learn Gemara. There's something unique about someone who wasn't raised in a certain type of environment and therefore has preconceived notions. When someone can come in with a fresh, clean slate, they can have a completely different view of what Gemara is like. I certainly try my best to show how Gemara does work in the 21st century and makes rational sense. But anyway, without further ado, we're definitely honored to have Manson Ho speak to us today. Good luck.
Thanks for having me, guys. Just want to thank Rabbi Ginsburg and you guys for just kind of humoring me. It's been a while since I've had an opportunity to speak in front of a crowd of any significant size. Some of the things that I go over today, I don't know if Rabbi Ginsburg has heard some of them. I've spoken at Seudah Shlishit and also nothing. Okay, all right then.
With all surprise.
All right, great, fantastic. So Rabbi Ginsburg asked me to talk about a couple of things. One is, like you said, someone who's coming from a very religious background, a fundamentalist Christian evangelical background, how I left that faith to embrace Judaism. He asked me to talk about what are some of the motivating factors and how it was like during those years of discovery. He also wanted me to talk about the conversion process itself. Was it filling, frustrating? Were there hurdles? The answer is yes, to put it bluntly. But I'll just kind of start off with a little anecdote. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, maybe 9 years old, I was in elementary school, and I didn't go to the best elementary school. In fact, I went to a school that you would say was in the ghetto. I was bused from one neighborhood into a ghetto neighborhood, to go to this school to kind of try to raise the non-black population of the school, and the school wasn't in a terribly good neighborhood, and so we would play on the playground outside, and you would find oftentimes a lot of trash, certainly a lot of glass. And so one day I was playing catch with a tennis ball, and I jumped up and caught the ball, and I landed on this huge pile of glass, and nothing happened to me. And I remember thinking at 7, 8, maybe 9 years old, thinking, man, this is some kind of miracle, I must have had some kind of angel protecting me or something. And even at that age, I knew that there was some kind of higher power, some kind of spirituality that I needed to tap into. So with that said, let me just kind of back up and talk about kind of the beginnings of my evangelical upbringing. And really, you have to start with a man named Billy Graham. Billy Graham was, or is, well, not so much anymore because he's pretty old, but he is a evangelical Christian who kind of is known for his huge rallies in stadiums and just being able to bring large amounts of people together in one place. In the late 1970s, he traveled to Hong Kong, where my parents were. They were probably about your age, actually, out of high school, trying to figure out what to do with their lives, and they went to one of these rallies, and that's where they accepted Jesus at this rally put on by Billy Graham, and they became Christians at that point. They got married in, I think, 78, 79. I was born in Hong Kong in 1980, and one of the photos that really sticks out in my mind from the short 4 years I spent in Hong Kong was one of me at my baby dedication at church in Hong Kong. And so that was really the beginnings of my upbringing was in Hong Kong in an evangelical Christian church. We moved to Fort Worth, Texas in 1984. My dad was going to university in the DFW area at the time, and so we moved to Fort Worth, Texas. And church was certainly a huge part of my family's immigrant life, and it's a large part of many Chinese immigrants' lives, is the church. The evangelical Chinese church that we went to was kind of an offshoot or a quote-unquote mission of a larger Anglo-American church. And it was ingrained in me at a very early age that the acceptance of Jesus was really the only way to salvation. And so I accepted Jesus when I was 7 years old at Vacation Bible School. And just looking back, my son now is 7 years old, and to think that he could make any kind of life-changing decision at 7 years old just kind of stupefies me. And it really epitomizes kind of the thing that evangelical Christians go after is, try to bring people to Jesus at a very, very early age, regardless of, their real ability to understand what's going on. So I continued to be brought up in the Chinese church. It was very conservative. I don't think that I would necessarily characterize it as fundamentalist. The hallmark of which I think is kind of the rejection of modernity. But it was certainly evangelical, no question about it. The highest virtue was spreading the gospel through missions. We went to huge evangelical rallies called revivals, kind of like the one where my parents went to in the late 1970s. These revivals had thousands of kids, teenagers. We sang songs, we prayed, we just re-devoted ourselves to Jesus and the evangelical cause. So everything in my life was seen through the lens of evangelicalism. Basically, who would be the next person you brought to church to convert? Which one of your friends from school are you going to bring to church next to come to church with you and to kind of teach them about the gospel? How many little kids could you lead to Christ on your summer mission trip? It was those kinds of questions, and it was through that lens that I viewed the world. At this point, I kind of need to take a step sideways and kind of tell a parallel story of my wife, Tatiana. Her mom and dad married in Chile, where her dad was in the Navy and stationed in Chile at the time. Then he was restationed in Jacksonville, Florida, and my wife was born on the naval base there. Her dad came from a Catholic family, and Her mom kind of sort of did too, although she can trace her roots back to the Spanish Jews who fled. Her mom and dad divorced when she was 4. Her mom remarried a Moroccan Jewish guy, and she went through the conversion process herself in Jacksonville soon thereafter. Despite this Moroccan Jewish man marrying my wife's dad, Tatiana was raised in an Orthodox home in the small Orthodox community of Jacksonville. She made Aliyah when she was 11, moved to Herzliya, lived among Hilonim, really didn't have a sense of an Orthodox Jewish community there, and life was really just very tough. I mean, 11 years old is tough anyways, but when you're raised in an Orthodox home and you come to Israel and you live among Jews who are not practicing, that was particularly tough on her. So at the age of, at the age of 14 or 15, she moved back to the United States to be with her birth father in Fort Worth, Texas, which is where her dad is from. And that's where we eventually met. Tatiana did not and could not live a Jewish life in Fort Worth. And really, she was not observant. There were no signs of her being Jewish or anything while we were dating in high school. This was in 1996 when we met. In fact, I took Tatiana to church. I told her, "Hey, you need to accept Jesus yourself, like me." And I did my evangelical thing, and she eventually got baptized in the church. I went away for college in New Orleans at Tulane for a year. Tatiana and I broke up for a little bit, but then I came back to Texas and I started going to university there, and we continued dating. I married Tatiana in a Christian church in 2002. We started our life together in Waco, Texas, which is where I went to law school at Baylor University. We went to church. Our oldest daughter was born in 2004, and we just led kind of your, basic, normal Christian life. I graduated law school in 2005 and began immediately working for a firm in Dallas. And we moved to a Dallas suburb, far north Dallas, Plano to be exact, and continued to go to church and, kind of doing our Christian thing. Then things started to change. My young career was chugging along. I was working a lot. We were trying to keep up with the Joneses and all the trappings of a yuppie suburban life. And my son was born in 2006, and we were still going to church with my family, the 4 of us, leading a Christian life. Then, when Eliana was 4 years old, and she's incredibly precocious, in 2008, she started asking really, really difficult questions, really hard questions that I never really kind of thought about, but it took the mind of a young child to come up with questions like, how can Jesus be both God and man? I mean, these are very basic, fundamental questions that I just never really bothered to ask. It was just kind of something that I accepted. So, Tatiana began thinking about reobservance and how she wanted to raise our children, how she wanted to run her household, and she knew deep down that something wasn't right. And, she'll tell you that she wanted to fit in with me and my family. She wanted to fit in kind of with the community that I was brought up in. And so she went to church, got baptized, got married in church, and led a Christian life thus far. Okay? But really, she had a very innate sense that something was wrong. She began trying to observe Shabbat. She got in touch with Orthodox rabbis in our far north Dallas suburb, and after a while, she just wouldn't go to church. I mean, she just kind of put her foot down and said, "Look, I can't go to church anymore." So I said, "Fine, I'll just go by myself." I mean, it was just kind of, I needed to continue doing what I had been doing all my life. So I just kind of went to church by myself, and she would go to shul, but I wouldn't go with her. I would, we lived about 6 miles away from the Orthodox shul, much too far to walk in any kind of weather, but certainly in Texas summers. So I would drive her and my daughter and my son to shul on Saturday morning, on Shabbos morning, and then I would go for a run. I would go for a run, and then about the time that I finished my run, I would go and pick them up from shul. And after every time, they would say, "Daddy, my kids would say, Daddy, why don't you come inside? Why don't you meet some of the rabbis? Why don't you, go out to lunch with them? Whatever." I always just kind of refused. Tatiana wanted me to go. I refused. I wasn't terribly upset about it, and she wasn't too upset about it at the time either. But then I began to read things on my own. I'm kind of I try to be objective about things. That's kind of, and being a Christian made me unobjective about my faith, which is a really important part of my life. I was just very unobjective about it. And so while I was objective about everything else, about other people, I wasn't objective about myself, and I began to take a hard look in the mirror and just kind of ask myself hard questions as well. I kept an open mind, and even though I grew up in an evangelical Christian, I never heard anything that was bad or necessarily anti-Semitic about Jews. It was just that Jews needed Jesus like everybody else, whether it's the Buddhist in China or the Muslim in the Arab countries. I never heard anything bad about Jews. I don't think that we necessarily did any particular outreach to them when I was growing up. The first book that I read was, I think it was called something like Jewish Literacy or On Jewish Literacy by Rabbi Tolushkin. And he told a lot of the same familiar Bible stories I had grown up hearing, from the Old Testament. And I began to question the legitimacy of the New Testament. I began to question my whole upbringing and really my whole outlook on life. I first went to a service at an Orthodox shul during Rosh Hashanah of 2010. I remember that the shul was in a 30-year-old shopping center. It was very nondescript. I think the prior tenant must have been some kind of like dog training center or something like that. It was just a space that this satellite campus of an Orthodox organization in Dallas proper was kind of using as outreach. There may have been some kind of big plastic sign at the front. There were folding chairs. I remember there was a box of white kippahs at the entrance. So I took one of those and I put one on, and I remember it being packed. High holy days, everyone comes out of the woodworks, whether or not they're Orthodox or whatever. And I remember going in there and just kind of being, open-minded, not knowing what to do exactly. And then I see this, this smile and this hand go up in the air, and it was one of the rabbis there, Rabbi Zev Wiener. He was sitting there, and he smiled at me, a big toothy grin, and he motioned for me to come sit next to him. And that was unbelievable. That was awesome. That was my very first experience in an Orthodox shul. It was fantastic. That one of the rabbis would be so welcoming. And it was also the first time that I read out of a siddur. And my initial reaction was, wow, this is really awesome. This is really worshipful, to use a Christian term. And I just couldn't find anything objectionable about it. I mean, it was in praise of God. It was lauding Him. It was talking about how awesome of a king He is. I thought, man, this is great. This is not new, but this is something that I thought that Christians held a monopoly on, and I found out that it wasn't. It must have been the tail end of the service because I wasn't there for very long before they kind of broke. But it made a lasting impression on me. The warmness, the friendliness, the inclusiveness. I ended up talking to the head rabbi there, Nasanya Zakon, and he was just very unpretentious. He was a very kind man, and in a lot of ways, ironically, it reminded me of the Chinese church that I grew up in, where it was just very. Also very unpretentious, very, very humble. And so, it kind of struck me as something that I might want to, be involved in, just to, because my family was part of it, and so I wanted to be a part of my family. I wanted to be involved in their lives, so I wanted to be a part of this shul as well. So things started to kind of snowball at that point. I had been going to church by myself, but I stopped going altogether. And I went to shul. We still drove. We were still, living 6 miles away. But we had lunches at our rabbis' homes. Our community had 3 rabbis, and they all lived, within about half mile of the shul. The community itself was really small, only about 20 families. So, every Shabbat, somebody was able to find a place to go for lunch at one of the rabbis' homes. The rabbis always had people over for lunch. In that way, I really got to know the rabbis. I got to learn some very basic Jewish things like Birkat Hamazon, morning blessings, that sort of thing. And I also began to read more and more. I had a 45-minute train commute from my house into downtown Dallas, where my office was. So I read a lot, and I went to Shiurim. So really, the motivating factor of me kind of exploring Judaism was certainly my wife, but also it was because of my request for truth. Yesterday, Rabbi Gizra, you probably don't remember this, but you said kind of offhandedly, critical questions are critical. And that really stuck out in my mind because of course they are, and that really epitomizes Jewish thought. You have to ask difficult questions to get at the truth. There's no sugarcoating in Judaism like you have in the Evangelical Church, where everything is, Jesus loves you, let's sing some songs and arouse our emotions, as if God didn't give us a brain to think. And most importantly in Jewish thought, I think, our questions aren't met with your faith isn't strong enough, or, and I've been told this a couple of times, that the devil is inside you asking these questions. All you have to do is get the devil out. Those sorts of really weird things. On the contrary, in Judaism, questions are met with, frank discussion. They're met with thought and rigorous debate, and I love that, and it's important. So in the intermediate years of discovery, while I was familiar with the biblical stories, it was very enlightening to learn much more about them and to have this and to be able to put it in the context of Jewish learning. I think Jewish faith permeates every aspect of life, and there's really no distinction between what you do in the synagogue and what you do at home and how you interact with your fellow man. Christianity teaches that the highest virtue is suffering here on earth. They're really into suffering and neglecting the self for the sake of a reward in the afterlife. But Judaism teaches that there is value to living life here in and of itself, and that's very, very important. And God intended us for us to be co-creators with Him, I think. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says, speaking of Am Yisrael, even after all the miracles that led them out of Egypt, all the miracles that kept them all alive, and after God Himself appeared to an entire nation, this nation made a golden calf. What could finally evoke a mature response? Rabbi Sachs says, the Mishkan was the answer. No one complained, and everyone contributed, so much so that Moses ordered them to stop contributing. They became partners with God in the work of creation. And I love that. I love being partners with God in the act of creation. That's something that you just don't find in Christianity. Everything is, top down. Everything is, you just have to believe to receive. And that's just something that I don't think that Judaism embraces to maybe to an extent, but certainly not in the same context like Christianity does. In Judaism, there's a sense that you've got to work for your life here on earth. I mean, there's a real emphasis on living, whereas in Christianity there just isn't. Let me grab this real quick. The Art Scroll commentary on last week's Parsha has kind of a similar thought. It says that, also talking about the Mishkan, the process was climaxed by as phenomenal an occurrence as human beings has ever been able to bring about. The glory of God rested upon the handiwork of man in full sight of every Jewish man, woman, and child. Now, they would see their tabernacle enveloped in holiness, the tabernacle that was built with their gifts, made by their hands, erected by their prophet, made possible by their repentance, assuring them that God's presence would forever remain in their midst if they would but continue to make it welcome. And I think that that's really powerful. To be called upon to be partners with God is something that is truly lacking in Christianity. Christianity is I don't know if laziness is the right word, but I think it's probably apropos. You just kind of have to believe. And in Judaism, while belief is very, very important, you also have to act. You also have to do. And nothing, I don't think, epitomizes that more than all the people after they had, witnessed this once in, an eternity event where God Himself appeared to the entire nation, and then they go and make the golden calf and commit this horrible sin, and God says, okay, you're going to come together and you're going to do something. You're going to build something as a people, and everyone's going to contribute. And that's what really attracts me to Judaism, is that I'm a part of creation. I'm a part of a nation as a whole. Christianity finds it presumptuous that there's some loftier goal than acceptance of Jesus and leading as many people as possible to acceptance of Jesus, and that's just something that I just can't believe that I ever believed anything like that. It's just it just seems so foreign to me now. Well, all right, so things really snowballed when we came for vacation to Israel in March of 2011. We stayed with my wife's sister in Migdal Bet Midrash and thought it was quaint and nice. Then we also traveled a little, and I fell in love with the country. We were here for 3 weeks, but I knew at that point that there was just something indescribably incredible about this place. We came back and thought about moving. I was climbing, in my career. I was progressing. But it was difficult, and it, to be frank, it took a toll on my marriage. It took a toll on my relationship with my kids, and for me, I just didn't see that as a positive direction. So in September of 2011, we decided to move to Israel. We put our house on the market in October, and within a week, and this is a true story, our house was under contract to sell to a Jewish couple. And one of the things that they requested, really they only requested 2 things in our contract. They paid our asking price, but they wanted 2 things. They wanted our refrigerator and all the mezuzot in the house. So that's all they wanted. And it was just absolutely amazing. It was like a sign from God that that we were supposed to move to Eretz Israel. We lived with my parents and friends for 3 very difficult months while the bureaucracy of making Aliyah kind of worked its way. Through the process, I quit my job in February of 2012, and we moved to Israel in March of 2012. After 2 weeks in Ramat Beit Shemesh, we found a nice apartment in Modi'in in April of 2012. We've been there ever since. All right, the good part. I immediately began my conversion paperwork in April of 2012, and I don't know how much you guys have had to deal with the bureaucracy here in Israel, but it is crazy. It is absolutely immense, the bureaucracy. There are all sorts of forms and letters and certificates that I had to get. I had to call up my rabbis in the States so that they could write letters of recommendation. I had to fill out this form. I even had to get letters of recommendation from people, here in Israel, even though I had only been here for like 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks. But I still had to get letters of recommendation. It was a big mess. The conversion process in Israel, the Orthodox conversion process, I think that might be the only way to convert in Israel is Orthodox. But it's a combination of 3 huge bureaucracies. 1 is the Prime Minister's office, 2 is Misrad HaPnim, and 3 is the rabbinate. And none of those 3 entities moves very quickly at all. And that's not an understatement. It just moves so incredibly slowly. I remember when I submitted my initial paperwork, I didn't hear anything from anybody, not even a confirmation of receipt for like 2 weeks. I ended up going to the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem and trying to get in there just to say, hey, where's my application? Where am I in the process? I had one of my sisters-in-law with me, and she's the better Hebrew speaker. She's a Sabra, she had to ask several guards. They have concentric circles of security at the Prime Minister's office, as you can imagine, and so we had to get past. I think we got past maybe like 3 of them before we got to like the I don't know, some kind of makeshift security office area right outside the Prime Minister's office, where we went in there and, we told them, hey, I submitted a conversion application. We just want to know what's going on. We've tried calling, we've tried faxing, haven't heard anything. And the guard at the front says, okay, what number are you trying to call? And so she called it, and she was immediately able to get someone. Not a big surprise, but it turns out that we were in the wrong place. Even though we had filed my application with the conversion office of the conversion division of the Prime Minister's office, we were in the wrong part of Jerusalem altogether. So we went away. At least we made a little bit of progress in that regard, and we knew that they had actually received my application at that point. Not to bore you with too many details, we eventually got an interview with one of the rabbis there, who, as you can expect, kind of questioned me pretty heavily on why I wanted to convert and that sort of thing. And he questioned me about Jesus and about my beliefs and what I thought of him and that sort of thing. And I answered his questions, I think. And I had to show up there with my wife and my kids. And the office wasn't easy to find, and it was not a pleasant experience, but it was just it was I guess a necessary part of the process. So we went through that. Soon thereafter, I began conversion classes. Conversion classes were at the Tel Aviv International Synagogue in Tel Aviv, by the beach, and we had to go there every Sunday and Monday for a year. And it was a real beating. It was a pain. Just the logistics of having to find a sitter for the kids. I began working in Ramat Gan, so I had to go there. I had to go from Ramat Gan to the synagogue while my wife herself was driving into Tel Aviv, and parking and traffic. During rush hour, it was a big mess, and it was a big headache for a year. Thankfully, my wife got pregnant towards the end, and we were able to get an excuse for my wife not to go to the conversion classes with me. I completed the conversion classes in October of last year, and then the fun part began, the process of arranging my bris. And that is an experience that I'm not sure I want to share on camera, but I'll be happy to share with you guys, off camera at some point. But it was not, it was very bureaucratic. It was not fun. Of course, it was necessary. And then after the bris was the mikvah. And we tried to condense all of that into a very window of time, because it was towards the end of my wife's pregnancy, and we weren't sure when she was going to give birth, and we wanted to get married again before she gave birth. Thankfully, I was able to complete the bris process and go to the mikvah and get married all within 4 days. Apparently, I recovered very quickly enough to go to the mikvah, and and then we had our wedding. It was fantastic. Rav Sobel married my wife and I in a neighbor's backyard, and it was amazing. It was really, really fun. Really great experience. So that's kind of it in terms of the conversion process. I'll leave you guys with a couple of things. The first one is a little bit more generic, and all I would say is at your age, I think you should savor your time. I think the way it works is that you guys finish high school, right? And you're in yeshiva, and then you're going to probably go to college or something like that. I would just tell you guys to savor your time. This is a great time for growth and to mature and to make decisions that are really going to affect your life, later on down the road. And I really wish that I had the opportunity to do something like this, where you kind of just step back from 12 straight years of school to reflect on the things that are most important in life, and that is to become a better person, to become better Torah scholars. The second thing I want to say is that every day in Shmoneh Esrei we pray for God's compassion, specifically to be aroused on the righteous, the devout, the elders, the scholars, and the converts. The article commentary says that these are the 4 categories of people who are the leaders of the Jewish nation. The Koran Siddur says that these are the 4 categories. Let me make sure I get this right. Right, these are the 4 groups of people who endow the Jewish people with greatness: the righteous, the pious, the elders, the scholars, and the converts. And my thinking is, I as a convert would be called great or a leader is incredibly humbling, and my every inclination is to reject the characterizations outright. I'm just not that type of person. The same section of Smones, right, also has us praying that we cast our lot with them, these 4 categories, including converts, forever, and not be ashamed. Again, I have the same inclination. Who am I to have all of Israel pray that they should cast their lot with me forever? Who am I? So I really see it as a great honor to be called a Jew, and to be a part of a people that values both nationhood and individuals and living life. My fervent prayer is that I will live a life deserving of and honorable to everyone in this room, everyone watching this video, and to everyone in our great history who have carried on the Torah's legacy. Thank you. Any questions? Make it good. Please.
No pressure. What was the event that really pushed you over the edge to make that first step of going to Shul and Rosh Hashanah?
I think it was probably just because my wife was asking. My wife has a great influence on me. I pray that you guys will find women who are so influential in your lives that they will lead you to do the right things. And my wife led me to do the right thing, and I really, I hope to honor her by always doing the right thing.
And also, why did she start to?
No. Go ahead.
Why did she start to I guess, go back to her Jewish roots?
Yeah. A couple of things. Number one, because my daughter, she's very bright. She's incredibly bright for her age, and she asked a very simple question. I don't know that she knows how profound of a question she asked. And she asked, how can Jesus be both God and man? And one of the core tenets of Judaism is that God is not physical. He can't be touched. He can't be seen. And it was something that is entirely contradictory to Jewish thought. And that really caused her to think long and hard about what she was doing.
Wasn't it overwhelming when you first started looking into Judaism, how many rules there are, how did you get over that? Did you push yourself?
Well, I knew that there were a lot of rules. I knew that there were a lot of rules, and in fact, one of the things that Christianity teaches you is that Jesus came to abolish all the rules, all the laws, so that you could eat whatever you want, you could do whatever you want, basically. But I knew that there were certain basic things that I needed to know in terms of rules or laws or whatnot, and I knew not to turn on the TV on Shabbos. I need to wash my hands before eating a meal consisting of bread. This is very, very basic things, and so it's been a process of just building off of some of those basic things, and I think that's something that I'll continue to do for the rest of my life, is just to continue building off of those very basic things. Yeah.
I got a few questions.
Sure.
Just out of curiosity, since you were in that, you were in the Christian the whole thing for a little while.
Right.
Factually,
A long while.
long while.
Yeah.
Factually, just to understand, it's what does the Pope do all day? Do you know of anything like that?
That's a very good question. No, listen.
My question's rabbis are they're learning and they're going back and forth and asking questions.
Right.
I don't know if there's shilohs about how high a Christmas tree can be or whatever.
I don't think there is. I have no idea what the Pope does. The Catholic Church is an entire institution that even evangelical Christians try to divorce themselves from. Evangelical Christians are Protestants. They split off from the Catholic Church when Martin Luther nailed his 12 edicts or whatever on the church door. I have no idea what the Pope does all day.
All right, so
I don't know too much about Catholic Church. I will tell you
I
that.
don't know the deal, sorry.
No, that's fine. All I know is that growing up, I think we were so, I don't know, kind of off the deep end a little bit, that we even saw Catholics as idol worshippers because they had statues of Mary and Jesus and Joseph in their churches, cathedrals.
So what do they, like, even when you went into like your Bible camp thing?
Yeah.
There was like a studying kind of thing, no?
Sure.
So what was studied? Just the stories, or like
Yeah, stories. Try
Old Testament, New Testament, both?
maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot of Jesus.
All right.
Certainly a lot of Jesus and Jesus' miracles and the stories and how we can emulate Jesus. Basically, that's kind of the bottom line.
Was it just a lot? The way you described it, you seemed like it was a lot. Was it all just a lot of oh, he was just a great person, I believe him, very just like service level kind of, he was great, you'd be great kind of thing? Like,
It was surface level, but it wasn't the way that you described. It wasn't like he was just another great person and believe it in him. It was much more dastardly than that. It was Jesus is the Son of God. He's at the same time the Son of God and God. That's what Christians believe.
Did they ever go into we have trying to explanations of this is how we think, I can prove it's real, and this is how Manson Ho happened, and these things. Do they have anything like that?
No. That's a great point, because there's like I said, there's no study into why this is the way it is, why the doctrine is the way it is. I think if you look into church history, I think the Council of Nicaea back in the 1400s or something like that decided, okay, we're going to have things this way, and that's it. And that's the way churches have followed this doctrine for centuries. I don't know how it came about. That's just the way it is.
Right.
And it never got any deeper than that.
Right here.
Yeah.
I've seen on videos this weird big ceremony, and this guy with a mic, and then he pushes on someone's head and everybody faints.
Yeah.
It's what's going on? Have you ever been to one of those?
Yeah, I have.
Is there a lot of acting going on? Or what's going on over there?
There probably is a lot of acting going on. I have not been to one of those. I know people who have been to churches like that. I mean, they do I think they call it spiritual healing, or Holy Ghost healing, or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what they call it. I don't know how legit it is.
Right. But people pay a lot of money for these things.
No, it's not that they pay a lot of money. They end up giving a lot of money. And they don't pay for someone to put their hands on their head so that they can faint and be healed of whatever it is that's inflicting them. But yeah, they end up giving a lot of money to these churches, and the pastors are very, very wealthy. Yeah.
What was your family's reaction to everything?
What is the reaction to everything is that I need to find my way back to Jesus.
Uh-huh.
That's the reaction. My relationship with my family is on eggshells, you could say. Just kind of the hazard that comes with going through what I've gone through. My mom has been here twice. The first time was in November, December of 2012 with my dad, and it was that was vacation where they would, we were rarely at home. We traveled to Aliyah, to Tiberias. We were out and doing touristy things. But this time when she was here after the birth of my twins, she let me know how displeased she was, and how I needed to find my way back to Jesus. She asked me point blank, you don't have Jesus in your heart anymore. And I just kind of brushed her off. I said, no, let's not talk about this. And we didn't. But she's clearly displeased, and she just thinks that if I listen to her, I don't know, tell me more about her thoughts, her feelings, and I would somehow find my way back.
Do they think you were brainwashed?
I don't think that they think I was brainwashed. I think that they think that I'm scared of my wife. My mom has told me that, which is partially true. Number one, I am scared of my wife. I have a healthy fear of my wife.
Every good husband has.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But also, number two, I mean, she thinks that I've just kind of been influenced unduly by not going to church enough or not hanging around the right people. That's how she feels. That's how she feels. Yeah.
Are you? Do you ever see yourself like going back and trying to get them at any point, or asking them the questions that you had? Or you do?
No, I don't think I will. It's. I mean, not to go into too much detail, but my family dynamics are not such that we're open for much frank discussion on anything. We kind of keep things on the surface, and so I don't see myself going back and trying to ask some of the hard questions.
When the she was telling your mom telling you, you gotta go to church more, you get it or whatever.
Yeah.
Was what would they do there that you think that she's thinking that they're gonna do, what the sermon that the priest gives or whatever, or
no, I don't. What is it? That's a good question. I have no idea. I don't know what she thinks. I don't know how she. I don't know why she thinks that going to go hear a sermon on how much Jesus loves me is going to change anything.
Is that really what it's like week in, week out? Jesus loves you for a different reason?
Basically, yeah.
And there's no huffman or anything to it. That's in it, or
no? There's not. Things are very superficial. Again, they try to not make it very deep, because then if you make it deep, people start to ask questions. And you're taught not to ask questions. You're really not taught to ask questions.
But I just don't understand how they can blatantly see in the Torah, everybody says in the Torah it says this will be forever, this will never change, and then never mind, forget it.
I know, and that's one of the most striking things, and one of the first things that stood out to me was that this is a covenant between God and His people forever, and He will not change His covenant. End of story. They believe that Jesus came and established a new covenant. He established a new way of salvation. And I'll just kind of go off on a tangent here a little bit, and I'll get to your question. My personal belief of what happened in Jesus' times was that He really took advantage of kind of the social, economic, and political situation. The Romans were here doing bad things. They were doing bad things, keeping the Jews from practicing, and really just kind of overall oppressing the folks who were living here at the time. And He took advantage of the situation. He knew that people were yearning for a Messiah. He knew that people were they wanted some way to unshackle themselves, both from the Romans and also from what they saw at the time as kind of a heavy-handed Jewish leadership that was, maybe it wasn't inclusive enough, or it was too stringent in certain regards. And so Jesus came and said, "You know what? Forget all that. You don't have to believe any of that stuff. All you have to do is follow me. Look, I'll turn 2 loaves of bread and 5 fish into enough food for 5,000 people. Will you believe me then? I'll walk on water in the middle of a storm in the Kinneret. Will you believe me then? I'll raise somebody from the dead. I'll send demons to pigs. I'll do this and that. Will you believe me then?" And so He, assuming that He performed all these things, if you're a Jew in Israel and you're being oppressed daily, what are you going to do? You're going to take the easy way out, right? Maybe. A lot of people did. I think most didn't, but I think a lot of people did. And then, later on, his apostles, specifically Paul and Peter, just kind of propagated and changed the message a little bit and made it into this worldwide phenomenon that even the Roman Empire adopted. Yeah, you next.
Did you convert to Ashkenazi or Sephardi?
That's a good question. Obviously, I daven in an Ashkenaz shul, but there are certain Sephardi traditions that I've taken upon, because my first exposure to Jewish traditions were from my wife.
What's your what? Sephardi?
Yeah.
Oh,
Right. She grew up Sephardi. And so, for example, I wear Sfard tefillin, but I wrap it in a Sephardi way. I will eat kitniot on Pesach, right? Where I know Ashkenaz don't. I say a little, bracha before I do hamotzi. So, little things like that. So I've adopted some Sephardi traditions, but I daven Ashkenaz. Yeah,
It's curious.
sure.
So I'm sure you're aware that as Judaism itself, like when you begin the conversion process, the first step is to try to push the guy away.
Right.
Okay. And then one of the things that's supposed to be told over is that that when you become a member of this nation, so you recognize that if this nation operates in a different type of, metaphysical relationship with God, in the sense that if we follow the Torah and the mitzvos, so great things happen.
Right.
But if we don't, we're in big trouble. Right. And then when you just take a look at Jewish history is one big pendulum, and we're 60 years from the Holocaust, and then before that there was another, and before that another. It's ad infinitum how many times the Jews have been subject to punishment from the world.
Right.
So the question is that you mentioned how great it was to be part of the nation, which it is great. But at the same time, how did you feel about the fact that you joined a group of people that tend to get persecuted every every century on average, for their beliefs, which we're always promised that we're going to survive. That's part of the covenant with God. But at the same time, that's one of the warnings, right? Individually, that's one of the warnings we give the potential convert. Like, recognize you're joining a group of people that if we don't follow, and we don't follow the commandments correctly, we're in for it.
Right. No, I am by nature a fighter, I guess you could say. I am by nature a person who likes a challenge, you could say. I don't want to put it pejoratively, but I like the challenge. I like the fight. I like the fact that the Jewish people have gone through all these horrible occasions in history, and yet they've survived. And there's something very attractive about that to me. About it's a survival aspect of it, and so I want to be part of that.
And just follow up. Did you ever consider becoming a Ben Noach?
I found out about that
after you converted.
No, not after I converted. Not after I converted because I think in 2010 the National Noahide Convention was in Dallas, and it was kind of a big deal.
Right.
It was kind of a big deal, and I thought that just was never attractive to me, because it was like, why not just go all the way? I don't do things by half measures. I kind of want to jump in with both feet, and I saw that as kind of like purgatory almost. I don't want to be in purgatory.
How do you feel about your law school experience, and whether or not it trained you to think in a certain type of more lawful way when it comes to like our commandments and learning and that type of thing?
Yeah, so I've made this comment to Rabbi Ginsburg before, is that learning the law, practicing the law, is a lot like learning Gemara. It really is. It really is. Rabbi Yishmael's, what is it called? Help me out here. Hold on one second.
The 13.
Yeah, what is it in English? Let me see.
I guess
Principles.
Right.
Yeah.
Principles of
study.
Derivatives. Yeah.
Right, 13 rules. 13 rules of studying. These are like the laws of contract interpretation. And I've dealt with a lot of contract interpretation in my legal practice, and I mean, this is like very, very familiar to me. It just makes so much sense to me the way that legal thinking and Torah study, Gemara study is. I mean, they're very, very similar. That's probably why there's so many great Jewish lawyers. Mm-hmm.
I like that. You said you were speaking before, like about like the emotional side of like the church. They're always just like Hashem loves you and all that.
Yeah.
God will not get Jesus.
Don't get confused.
That's where my question was going. Actually, how do you feel about like those kind of approaches to Judaism nowadays, like in youth groups, like in NCSY or in Chabad or anything like that? How do you feel about it?
So that's news to me. I didn't know that that was kind of a thing. I didn't know that was kind of a thing where they kind of, I mean, are they watering down the message?
It's something not the same as like, Jesus loves you.
They're not like very. They're not like closing off like what you're describing as Christianity is.
Right.
They're like oh, don't ask questions, whatever. But like they're like in a youth group, like they'll be like, oh, Hashem wants you to give a Dvar Torah about like saying the pasuk that brings out how much Hashem cares about stuff like that. Yeah, and then you go more begin, you ask more questions and stuff like that. But
right.
like, just to bring people in and stuff. Some people don't like that.
There have been infiltrations, for lack of a better term, right? I mean, you call it intellectual or ideological assimilations from certain, not just practices, but theological outlooks that personify Christianity that have creeped their way into some streams of Jewish education. You'd be surprised.
Is that a way to popularize Jewish learning?
Part of it is because certain factions are very insulated from the rest of society, so they fear. There is an inherent fear built in of questioning theology, not in a skeptical way, just to do the necessary. Abraham was the founder of Judaism, monotheism, right? Sure. And he's personified purely because of his rational inquiry and discovery of God. That's it. There's not practice of anything, no practice of any law. It's simply that he discovered God in the sense that this must be a non-physical deity. Okay. That was his discovery, right? So Judaism is centered around that, inquiry, that type of process. But there is, without question, forget practice. There are some practices also that have been incorporated from, creeped their way into the system from Christianity. But even there are some educational streams that have shut down the questioning process. And as Max is alluding to, they teach you to, in a sense, you just put it a different way. There's many times you can hear a rabbinical person, right, give a lecture, and you could just exchange the rabbi with a preacher and exchange Jesus with God, and it's the exact same thing.
Really?
That's true, right? 100%. I'll show you instances of that. It's very easy.
Okay.
Well, that exactly is like on the hindsight as a cure aspect, then you get more into it, then you go more begin.
Right, so that's the argument. Yeah. Well, according to some,
it's just to bring people in.
Yeah. Once you know it's right, and you know Christianity works that way, and you want to get as many people doing the right thing, seemingly it would make sense to just get everybody to do it. Christianity's got a good idea, but they might be wrong. But once someone does the questioning, figures out it's right, and gets everybody to do it, that's fine.
That's interesting. Yeah.
But you did say that your first experience with Judaism was going to that shul the first time, and it was very emotional. And Rabbi Wiener brought you in.
Right.
And said that was very like the Chinese church.
Yeah, it was like the very Chinese church in the sense that it was very intimate. It was very just like the whole thing where it was in a shopping center that was for some other use before, and it was in a 30-year-old building, and it had very humble beginnings. And that that kind of appealed to me because I didn't want anything pretentious. I didn't want to be a part of something that was big and grandiose. In fact, I at first, to be honest, when I started the first time I went to the Bukhman Ashkenaz shul, I was thinking, man, this is a really nice building. This is a really nice shul. What are these people like? And so at that point, I made kind of a I don't know what maybe like a prejudgment of the type of people that would be there. My judgment was wrong, but I mean that was just kind of my thinking. Yeah.
Is there anything similar between Christianity and Judaism? Anything?
Yeah, there's a lot of similar things.
Like I don't know. It sounds like that's a better question, man.
do that.
Right. No, there's a lot of similar things. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, we could talk about it all night, talk about the similarities. I remember growing up and singing a song about Father Abraham. You know, Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. Now, it was a song. Right, and there's hymns that we used to sing, like, you know, when we, in Kedusha, when we say Kadosh, 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 that is a hymn that we sing, Holy, Holy, Holy. And so there's a lot of similarities between Judaism and Christianity, and so it wasn't, you know, a completely different and novel thing to me when I first began studying. It wasn't completely different. I would, you know, I might even say that I'm thankful for having been raised a Christian, so that I have this basis upon which to build my Torah knowledge. Yeah, I'm not sure who was first. Yeah.
Okay. When you said that you spoke about the first time you picked up a siddur,
Yeah.
did you know Hebrew then? Like, how did you learn?
No, I still don't know Hebrew. I dominate English.
English. Okay.
Yeah, except for some small parts, I dominate English.
Yeah.
On the note before of being raised as a Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know you mentioned that your wife was bringing your kids to shul a little bit before, and you were basically sort of guilted, sort of forced into the belief of Christianity. How do you feel about now your kids being sort of subject to the only possible religion being Judaism? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I feel like Judaism has mechanisms for questioning core beliefs. That's what's great about it. You know, you can ask questions all day long and get answers all day long. You can sit there and debate and, you know, and talk things through, and that's what I want for my kids. I want them to ask why they're Jewish. I want them to ask hard questions. You know, why we believe the way that we believe. So I have absolutely no problem, quote unquote, indoctrinating them with Judaism, because I know that Judaism, in and of itself, has the mechanism for further thought, for further, you know, growth. Yeah.
Yeah, from like a Christian's eye, are Jewish people really that different from Christians? Because like we still worship God, we still got the Old Testament in, and if God and Jesus are the same thing, then we basically got Jesus.
That's a good question. I think yes. Particularly with the Christianity that I grew up with, the evangelical Southern Baptist Christians. They believe that Jesus is the way. They quote oftentimes a very famous verse in the New Testament. It goes something like, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one goes to the Father except through me." And they take that very, very literally.
So it's like you don't have to do anything about God because Jesus is like the segue to God.
Yeah, but it's even more convoluted than that, because they believe that Jesus is God. He's number one, both the segue, like you said, but also he is God. So you have to kind of bend your mind around
I'm saying
that.
if like praying to Jesus is basically praying to God, then isn't praying to God basically praying to Jesus?
Yeah.
Sometimes the Judaism.
Yeah. They believe that, for example, Jesus created heaven and earth.
Right. So I'm saying when Jewish people in their eyes pray to God, shouldn't that be like it's just Jesus just with a different word?
No, they don't believe that. They believe that Jesus is God, but if you're a Jew and you're praying to God and you're not praying to Jesus, then you're doing something wrong.
It's not